Okay, let's talk about invertible counterpoint. This is another thing that we find in fugues a lot. And in order to explain it, let's zoom way in here. Okay, so I'm looking at the answer and the counter subject, right? Invertible counterpoint means that the subject or the counter subject can be, well, are written in a way that they can flip voices. In other words, the subject might be in the upper voice and the counter subject in the lower voice, and in a later spot, the that might be the opposite. Okay, one might be the higher voice, one might be the lower voice, and they flip. So what that means is that when they flip, they have to still maintain, they have to not upset the harmony when they flip. So what that really translates to is relying on a lot of thirds and sixes. Okay, so for example, well, let me explain that a little bit more. So if, let's say, there was a seventh, for example. So if we had D here and a C here, okay, then this would be a seventh, and the harmony would be some kind of seventh chord, right? That's fine. Or assuming it's not a passing note, but let's call it, let's assume that it's an important note to the harmony. So then when it flipped, it would be a second, right? Because if this was a C, then it would flip. We'd have a C on the bottom, and a D on top. So now we've got a second, which implies a different kind of harmony than a seventh, right? That would be some kind of suspended chord, which is really not used in this style of music very much. So that would be a bit of a problem. So when we do this invertible counterpoint, we use a lot of thirds and sixes because they can flip and still imply the same harmony, right? So if we go through this and look at all of our harmonies, we should find a lot of thirds and sixes and then passing tones, okay? So let's just take a quick look. So we have D up to F, that's a third. D up to E, that's a second, but in this case we can call that a passing tone. D to D, that's an octave, so octave's also A-OK in this situation. D to F, that's a third. G to E, that's a sixth. G to D, that's a fifth, which is a kind of a dangerous one, right? Because if you flip that, you have a fourth, which changes the harmony. So, but in this case, we can call that a passing tone, so it won't affect us very much. G to C sharp is a tritone, in this case, an augmented fourth. So we would probably call that a passing tone, although it's on a strong beat. So that's a tricky one. So that might be an exception, but probably a quick passing tone. Up, and then we jump up to this E, which is a sixth. F to D is a sixth. F to A is a third. F to D is a sixth. E to E is an octave. So you can see lots of thirds and sixes make for more comfortable invertible counterpoint. Now you'll see later in these pieces things get even more complicated, where we have that, let's look here, might be a good example. At this point, what we have what's called double counterpoint, and that's when there's essentially three things happening. We have a subject or a counter subject, and then two levels of counterpoint, so double counterpoint, all of which are invertible. So this all has to be invertible so they can be switched around. And later, I don't know if we have it here, probably here if we looked close, we might have triple counterpoint, where we have a subject, although I don't really see a subject here. We have a subject and then 3 levels of counterpoint, all of which are invertible. That's triple counterpoint. This is where stuff just gets crazy, and you start to think, how does your brain work to be able to write in this way, where there's like invertible triple counterpoint with subjects and counter subjects both going, and all of this happening at the same time? It boggles the mind. Okay, so those are the elements of our exposition. So let's look through this and kind of analyze it a little bit and just kind of identify the main things. Let's go to a new video and do that.